Is it time for UCF to move on from Gus Malzahn?
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every day. Joining me, as he does every Friday, is my good friend Andrew Glucko from The Last Word on Sports. We're going to give him the first word on this topic as soon as I let you know that this show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Please go check them out. If you're betting on the game, FanDuel is the place to do it. Andrew, we're at the bye week.
And bye is undefeated.
No team has ever lost on the bye week. Maybe. Losing on the bye week would be like getting fired from your job on your day off. What could you have possibly done? I think a lot of fans are asking, what can Gus possibly do to save his job? You mentioned in an earlier segment that we did that you felt like, look, UCF just can't afford to fire Gus right now. They are sitting at 4-6. They need to win the last two to make a bowl game. Is Gus's job safe here no matter what? Is there a result that can actually get him fired at the end of the season?
Well, they would need some sort of wealthy benefactor to fork over a lot of money for this. Gus's buyout somewhere between $12 and $13 million.
Okay.
They have to pay Ted Roof another $700K plus. Then you have to replace Gus and you have to buy out whoever coach you're hiring. So there's some more money, and it depends on where you go for that. If you go to like the G5, you're probably looking at $2 million range. If you're going to the P5, chalk that up 3-4 times.
Right.
So you're looking at in the realm of upwards of $20 million to replace this staff.
No.
UCF doesn't have that kind of cheese. And let's add on to that. With the House settlement been, gone through the preliminary approval, it's going to, the expense part is going to start to hit UCF's revenues. They're not going to get the full payouts they had originally anticipated because there is a back pay that's required as part of the House settlement. And then in 2026, they start that whole salary cap thing essentially, and they need to start building up funds for that. So there's a reason why Florida did not just suck it up and fire Billy Napier. This is not a good time to fire your coach if you can get away with it.
Well,
so I think UCF's gonna hold on to him for at least one more season.
In the statement that Florida released about Napier, they talked about I think it was clear that he hasn't lost the locker room. His kids showed a lot of fight. They won some games. They did a lot better with that schedule than I thought that they were going to do. And we can both agree that one of the hardest schedules, if not the hardest schedule we've ever seen in college football history, like 11 Power 5 teams they played this year. And, in the non-conference, you're talking about UCF, you're talking about Miami, you're talking about Florida State. Now, Florida State is obviously one of the biggest dumpster fires in college football history.
Wow. I mean, right? Record-setting bad.
But I think that it was clear that he had the chips kind of stacked against him. I think it would have been wrong to fire him in a season where he had the toughest schedule ever. And, you had conference expansion, just a lot of things happening around Napier right now. But for Gus, UCF fans, week after week, show after show, day after day, are in our comment section saying, look, he's had enough time to do this. And here we are, and the best quarterback was maybe sitting on the bench all season, and we feel like it's time to move on. Now, part of the conversation, and you mentioned it about where do you go, or do you go to the G5 for a coach, is if you do this, you have to upgrade somehow. And is that coach out there? Is he going to be available? And can you get him to come to UCF?
Well, and here's the thing. UCF, from a football standpoint, is an attractive place to be. You're in a recruiting hotbed. You have the conference affiliation. It's a great place for a P5 coordinator to become a first-time head coach. It's worked out for the last couple of them. to rise up and take that mantle. Granted, they were a G5 program, but still, it is a very easy spot to win at if you're able to recruit the state. And UCF, in my opinion, is still growing into the conference. Even though they have the portal, NIL is an issue. UCF's NIL collective is not nearly to the scale as a lot of these other G5 programs, including Big 12 conference mates. And as a result, their talent is still not fully there. Like, they don't have a Big 12 quality offensive line, for example. They're getting there. They've got pieces, but you still got players that were brought in years ago that are starters that really aren't top, that top level quality that you would expect from a power conference team. And that takes time, that takes money, that takes a stroke of luck. Gus has done a pretty good job snooping the portal.
Yeah.
Finding guys. And I remember before they brought in KJ Jefferson, fans wanted Grayson McCall. And that was the guy they all wanted. Well, look what happened to Grayson McCall. Got hurt, career over. Even before he got hurt, didn't really pan out for NC State at all. It just wasn't working. So they ended up with KJ Jefferson instead of Grayson McCall, but I guess they would have probably lost on this either way. But things happen for a reason. And I think if things didn't play out the way they did, you wouldn't have found a Dylan Rizk on your bench.
Right.
The opportunities have kind of played themselves. There were people who were like, oh, we should have kept Thomas Castellanos, who just quit, by the way, at Boston College. Got benched, and before the next game has said, I'm done, I'm leaving the program. I'm sorry. UCF is better off without Thomas Castellanos. I'm sorry. They have a multitude of players that are not much different than he is. And look, the moment he got put on the bench, he decided to quit. I don't see Jacurri Brown saying, oh, I got benched, I'm going to go quit. No, he's still there. He's still, working with the team. Now, whatever happens in the offseason happens, but he's staying on the team the rest of the season. He doesn't have to, but he's choosing to. And, I don't think that there's a number of players who left.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of players who stayed that could have left. And I think that's indicative of a slight change in culture, because you did have some coaching changes and stuff like that. So, there are some dynamics moving around. But a lot of these guys were here last year. So, what's really changed between last year and this year? I don't buy that the rumor that that he's fully lost the team.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't have seen what happened during the space game, if he lost the team. I mean, they absolutely dominated. They looked very much in sync. They would have laid down and died against Arizona State. They did. Arizona State 7-2. They're pretty good. And UCF, went to the wire with them. They did the same with Iowa State, a few weeks earlier. If this was a team that was quitting, they would have laid down and died. We saw that in 2015 of a talented squad that laid down and died during the season. So, there's going to be problems with the roster if they move away from Gus, because, they have a lot more freedom to leave the program. If a coaching changes happens, they have that extra time to basically, transfer out. And you'd have to basically create a whole new team from scratch.
Yeah, I think there are issues, right? Obviously, with changing coaches, it's going to be there are risks. There are risks certainly, but the question you're answering, if your UCF staff is this as good as it's going to get, right? And if it is, at what point do we decide to move on from this and try to get better? Like, what is an acceptable? What is the standard that we're setting? Is it championship? Is it 8 wins? Is it 9 wins? For a program that hasn't won championships but does have that undefeated season going back to 2017, if I'm a UCF fan, I want 2017 every year.
Yeah, but that's unreasonable. That's flat out unreasonable to have that kind of expectation. This is not a destination program. Some people, oh, it's a destination. No, it's not. Most P5 programs are stepping stone programs. You got to go to your Blue Bloods, your Ohio States, your Alabamas, your Texases. Those are destination programs.
So you can't expect a coach to come in and make you a blue blood. Like, I mean, I get
on a short
traditional
time.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you have to start somewhere, and I think finding the coach that can lay the foundation for that, and obviously hiring. You either got to let a guy do the job long enough to get you there, or you have to have a string of hires that are good enough to get you there. And it's going to be interesting. Is he the guy that gets you there, or did he lay a foundation that another coach can pick up? I would argue that maybe Scott Frost did better in his short tenure at UCF than Gus has done. Like, did Josh Heupel do better than Gus has done?
I would say Josh Heupel did better. Scott Frost found lightning in a bottle. Half of that team that went undefeated in 2017 were not his players.
Still had
a lot of guys were George O'Leary players. There was still a lot of that team there. Your Traquan Smiths and your Griffin twins. Now, granted, Scott Frost made the smart decision of moving Shaquem Griffin to essentially kind of an outside linebacker defensive end tweener. But those weren't his players that he brought in. And we saw what happened when he had to build his own team. He failed miserably. People are like, oh, I want to bring back Scott Frost. And I'm like, oh, hell no. One, you don't redate your exes for a reason. You want to look forward, not
that
backwards.
We can for damn sure agree on.
Yeah, you look forward. You don't look backwards. Appreciate what has happened. Wish him the best of luck, but you're not dating your ex again.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I would not want Scott Frost back at this program. But you can use what he did as a basis to try to find the next guy.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see if there's a next guy next year as the season winds down. I think these next two games will tell us a lot about where UCF plans to go in that regard. If you're Gus, win the last two, you make the conversation a little bit easier. Lose the last two, or maybe lose the last two in an embarrassing fashion, and you may have some uncomfortable conversations that you have to have. Look, there's some uncomfortable conversations happening for the bottom teams in the Big 12, and we're going to talk about that right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at Omaha Steaks, Andrew. Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. This year, skip the holiday hustle and bustle and save 50% off gourmet gifts site-wide at omahasteaks.com, plus get a $30 reward card when you shop early. And score an extra $30 with promo code COLLEGE. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steak experience. I'm a steak guy. I know you're a steak guy. I think you cook steaks for dinner.
I had a nice sirloin steak just this past night.
Well, the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages starting at $89.99. From legendary steaks to mouthwatering desserts and more, save 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE and a $30 reward card when you shop early. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com and an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. Minimum purchase may apply. The bottom feeders. There's some things going right in the Big 12 this year. I think that they have entered the college football playoff conversation, and then there are those teams stepped on to get there.
Unfortunately, UCF is the latter.
Yeah, right. So I want to talk about the stepped on, the downtrodden, the betrayed.
You're beaten. You're broken.
Yes, man. Your Kansas, your UCFs, your Arizonas, Utahs, Oklahoma States down here at the bottom of the conference with 2 conference wins or less. Look, who's the worst team in the Big? I know Oklahoma State's 0-7 in conference, but who's the worst team in the Big 12 this year? Is it Oklahoma State?
I mean, I think from a talent standpoint, it's Arizona. This is a team that seems completely lost. Oklahoma State just I can't figure out what went wrong with them. I mean, this is they have a good coaching staff. It's not like a new staff coming in. Arizona's got a new coaching staff coming in. They lost some talent, in the off season. They still have some great guys in there, but there's just too many holes. Oklahoma State, this was a continuation from a good squad last year. And they laid down and died. Mm-hmm. Utah was a team with high expectations. They have completely folded. And I know the BYU fans are just laughing it all the way to the bank, considering they're sitting at the top of the Big 12 standings.
Let's reframe this conversation. In Big 12 media days, Oklahoma State was picked to finish third in the conference behind Kansas State and Utah.
And they're in the bottom five.
Utah is 1-5, and the second worst team, Oklahoma State, is the worst team by record. In conference, as far as conference record is concerned, because Utah is 4-5, Oklahoma State is 3-7, but 0-7 and 1-5 in the conference, respectively. And then when you look at the rest of that, Kansas was picked to finish fourth in the conference. They are in the bottom five. Boy, the media really got it wrong here this year.
I'd like to preface.
Arizona was picked fifth. They are the second worst team. What happened? BYU was picked to finish 13th.
I have to preface, I did not vote in that.
Okay, all right.
I just want to preface that. I actually voted. I did vote in it for my previous site last year. I did not vote in it this year.
They got this laughably wrong.
Oh, absolutely horrendously wrong. Like, everyone poo-pooed Colorado. They thought it was just that Deion's team was just going to fold up like they did last year. They thought Cam Rising was the second coming, and he was going to take Utah to the promised land again. But here's the truth. This isn't the Pac-12. This is the Big 12. And Cam Rising didn't hang.
Mm-hmm. That's funny. That's really funny. I'll tell you, this was one of the funniest things I think I've seen in looking at these preseason rankings. Now, I vote in multiple media polls as a media member. I vote in the SEC media polls, as a member of a beat there as well too. And I can tell you, this is the worst I think I've seen in terms of what they predicted, where everybody finished. UCF was predicted to finish 8th, middle of the pack, which was probably fair. It's probably a fair assessment of this team. But Arizona State picked to finish last. They're having one of the best seasons they've had in a really, really long time. Again, BYU probably the most egregious one here. They picked them 13th. And look at BYU this year. Again, they're having one of the best seasons we've seen from them. They haven't lost a game. They're 9-0.
Well, maybe at least for the people who voted from the state of Florida, maybe there was a weird thing with the voting ballots, and you picked one and it chose another or something. Because there's no way to actually logically reconcile how off everybody was.
Oh my goodness! Wow!
You just can't. It's unreconcilable. Yeah. At how bad this was.
Yeah, it was terrible.
Just terrible. Even UCF currently, if I'm correct, is 13th right now in the conference. That 2-5. They've got the bye week that'll kind of reset some things. But being picked 8th. They could still get back there. And while this team in the local media's opinion was built to win, you look at the how they were picked compared to the rest of the conference. Media's like, that's built to win, and they're going to be disappointed because they're not going to, they're barely a mid-level team. Yeah. So, they're a couple wins away from having a couple of those big upsets and would be right in the middle of the pack. But I think what we saw is what UCF is.
Yeah, well, it's they got it wrong. But look, there's something that we hope you never get wrong, and we're going to talk about that right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And Andrew, if you're on FanDuel, we hope you don't pick your games like the media picks the the winner of the Big 12.
Only if I'm willing to donate money to FanDuel.
True. Very, very, very true. But no matter whether you think you're right or wrong, go check out our friends at FanDuel. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Andrew, let's. I just want to close playing a quick game, just really fast. UCF has West Virginia and Utah in that order left. Most likely outcome, or really quickly for me, 2-0, 1-1, or 0-2 over these last two games.
I think they can go 2-0 in this, and I think part of it is how does this week stack up? West Virginia plays Baylor. If they win, they hit the 6th win. They become bowl eligible. The desperation level comes down. I think that plays to UCF's favor. Utah, they play in the next 2 games, Colorado and Iowa State. They lose those 2. They have 7 losses. They're not bowl eligible, and that'll be a defeated team by the time they come to Orlando. So I think they could win both. But I think part of it really sets up based on how they work out this weekend. So we want West Virginia to win to get to that 6th win, and we want Utah to lose the next 2 and get to that 7th loss.
Well, yeah, I think I think that 2-0 is probably the most likely scenario. A little bit of homer in me, but nothing impressive happening, I think, at Utah. West Virginia will be a tough test for them. They're 4-2 in the conference right now. Morgantown, we talked about this on previous segments, is a really hard place to go play. But this team I think it's pretty close to figuring something out. The games they lost have all been really close. West Virginia, you actually look at the point differential average. West Virginia is like 1.1 is the differential. UCF is plus 6.6 to 6.8 range. And that's because they had some very skewed big wins. The Arizona win, the first 2 games of the season with New Hampshire and Sam Houston. That skews it up. But West Virginia, either they win big or they lose big. There's not much in between, and it kind of just balances out. Yeah. Well, look, we're going to balance this thing out and be back at you guys tomorrow with more Locked On UCF. But before we get out of here, Andrew, tell people where they can find you.
You can catch me on Twitter /X at StatBoyDrew. And you can catch my writing at The Last Word on College Football, part of The Last Word on Sports Family.
Guys, thank you for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every day. For your second listen, go check out the Locked On Big 12 podcast. Our friend Drake Toll leads the conversation in conference realignment news and pulls no punches when it comes to talking about every team in the Big 12. Go check out Locked On Big 12 on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can check us out right here on YouTube, again, with more Locked On UCF tomorrow.